Hail to the king, baby.
Welcome to this episode of Kingology with your host Mark. Oh, it's been a while since we recorded one of these, and I'm going to be doing this one solo. It's the last story in the 4 Past Midnight set of novellas. It's called The Sundog. These were written between 1988 and 1999, and this was published August 1990. And in many ways, it kind of gets compared to different seasons, which is also 4 novellas. Though I think it's kind of different. This is a different kettle of fish. So we've already covered the Langoliers, Secret Window, Secret Garden, and the Library Policeman, and now we come to the Sundog, which I have read before. And I do remember it reasonably vividly. There was a few elements I'd forgotten, but I kind of remembered this one reasonably well. An interesting story, this one. It's set in Castle Rock. So Castle Rock, that place in the Stephen King sphere, you know, alongside Derry and Salem's Lot, the stuff happens. I mean, we've already been here with the Dead Zone and Cujo, and it's mentioned, and it's part of The Body, and in fact one of the characters in this story is related to someone who's in The Body. Rita Hayworth for the Social Redemption. In several of his short stories in the Skeleton Crew, it's kind of mentioned, and I think our last major visit was The Dark Half, where Alan Pangborn, the Sheriff Alan Pangborn, is a major character in that book and is certainly mentioned in this one. So, now apparently this forms like a loose trilogy, what's known as the Castle Rock trilogy. The Dark Half being the first one, this being the second, and the next book we cover in where we come to Castle Rock is Needful Things. So Alan Pangborn is mentioned in this one. There's a few mentions in this. The main characters one of the main characters in this is Pop Merrill, who we find out is Ace Merrill's uncle. Now, I remembered this differently. I remember the first time I read it, it was his grandpa. But I think his uncle or his great uncle in this one. He does think about Ace Merrill. He does mention Ace Merrill in his thoughts and how he's in Shawshank. So, again, a link to Shawshank. And this is a goofy story, quite a goofy story, but King, panache makes it work. A boy gets a Polaroid camera for his birthday, but he discovers instead of taking pictures of the things he points at, he's got a weird picture of a fence, which then becomes like a weird black dog. And there's things about the dog that just make it creepier and creepier. So it gets kind of damaged, and instead of returning it, he decides, or trying to return it, he decides he wants to try and get it fixed, and he goes to see Pop Merrill, who runs this shop, because he thinks he might be able to fix it. And he demonstrates what's up. But Pop Merrill actually tries to exploit the situation for his own ends. There's going to be spoilers throughout this, by the way. And it basically fools Kevin out of the camera, thinking he's broken it, when in fact it's a copy, a replacement that Pop Merrill bought, so he could then sell it on. He's got links everywhere. This guy's a real salesman and kind of knows what's going on in town. He's also a moneylender, and there's a tie-in, quite strong tie-in, with Kevin's father John, who had to borrow money from Pop Merrill, $400 to cover a bet that he made at a weak moment, and when he lost the bet, he had to cover it before his wife found out. He thought he could destroy his marriage, but Pop Merrill was charging him 10% a week interest on it, so he had to work extra hard, do extra shifts for 8 weeks, I think, to sort of get enough money to pay off Pop Merrill, cracking away at that interest. So he's not a fan of Pop Merrill, let's put it that way. However, between the three of them, they kind of are obsessed with this camera. Now, as a book, this is I'm not quite sure I make it. I can't quite decide if I really like this or I think it's just a bit overlong. I'm not really sure. I will say I read it quite a while ago and it remains memorable. That is quite something for such a weird little story like this. The premise is goofy as hell. This weird camera that can somehow see into some other dimension, maybe, that also is running at a different time rate or something like that. Feels almost David Lynchian in its sort of what's going on here. there's also quite a lot of King tropes. I mentioned it's set in Castle Rock. There's mentions of other stuff that's happened in Castle Rock. I think the murders in the Dead Zone's mentioned. I can't remember for sure now off the top of my head, but Cujo certainly is. And as I say, Ace Merrill's mentioned, and Alan Pangborn is a major character. So it's all of those kind of fit in, and this is in some respects a story about kind of regret and the past catching up with you a bit when it comes to his father, but it's also a bit about greed. In fact, I think some of the elements in it presage the coming next book, Needful Things, so it feels possibly a kind of dry run for that in some ways. Quite liked it, and I don't quite understand how they overcome the issue in the end. I don't want to go into specific detail. I think I don't want to reveal everything, but it's one of these King, you dream a solution, you do it, a bit like they do with Pennywise in It. You know, they know that if they think it's going to hurt him, it does hurt him, even though it's just water or whatever. So there is that going for it. I give this a strong recommend, actually. I quite like this one. It was better than I thought. It was okay, but possibly a bit too goofy. But I quite like it. It does feel overlong. There are quite long stretches that could be actually completed in a sentence, but instead King opts for sort of 15 pages. But she's it's still fine. It's a fine piece of writing, but it's Stephen King as an artisan, I think, rather than an artist. Though there's a few touches of some great sort of lines here and there. So yes, so it's a strong recommend for me. I quite like this. So the dog, I still don't get what it's about, really. What was that dog? What's it? And I don't. The problem is, I don't see Kevin's ever done anything wrong, so I don't understand why he deserves this. And I kind of get why his dad might, and I get why Pop Merrill might, but I don't understand why Kevin seems to be the focus of all this. I'm really not sure. It's one of those things that, like, there's no moral to this in that sense. It's like, why is this stuff happening to this boy? You know, this boy who's fairly naive and still kind of young at heart. So it's odd. But the writing is rather good. So there you go. Okay, so Sundog by Stephen King, strong recommend, I think, but I'm still not entirely convinced I'm right about that. So there you go. Okay, so goodbye from me.